I found poster putty. It's not gum. It's the part. We need more alliteration. Yes! Wait.
You have to like turn.
Goodbye. You always leave on a high note. Yeah, you get applause or cheers, you walk out. That's my rule of life.
You have to like turn that way.
Yeah. No. It's fun to throw it. The guy I bought it from was like doing this, one in each hand, just going like this on cobblestone. He was good. Someday, people. What? The car is cleaning up the neighborhood. Okay, so where do we finish here? Did we get to overproduction and over-speculation? What was the panic?
1837.
And conservative economics, what kind of capitalism is that? And what kind of economics is that? Conservative economics? Oh, I already said it. What philosophy is the basis of conservative economics? 3D glasses. It actually hurt my eye.
By looking at the projector screen, it does.
So this is why I suggest, I gotta tell the seniors, I've tried every year. Okay, so who, now perfected is a weird word, but who's the one who took Sumner's idea of social Darwinism and made it into something even more palatable to the wealthy? Yeah. Well, Carnegie didn't do that. What did Carnegie do? Took social Darwinism and created the what?
Gospel of Wealth.
Gospel of Wealth. Who took the idea of social Darwinism and Spencer was the first one. He invented it. Sumner, yeah.
No, you said that's a question.
Did I
took Graham Sumner's idea.
Did I really say that?
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking Spencer. Not what I think, not what I say. So I meant to say Spencer's idea. Okay. And return to Spencer coin. I really mean Spencer this time. Yes, survival is. And according to conservative economics, but it comes from Sumner's folkways, in his view, what is natural? A couple of things are natural. The market and inequalities. Inequalities are natural, they're normal. And not only that, not only inequalities of like one person taller or shorter, I mean of the classes. We're talking classes. We have a small group on top. And we didn't get here, did we? We got to...
We just got to there.
There, okay, good. And who should government help? If government interacts in the economy, who should they help? Yeah, those on top, because it's natural. And what did Carnegie call the very social Darwinistic view of people who are not wealthy? What are they? I said weak. Remember, they're like slothful, they're drunken, but and they're immoral. The big, I always come back to there's something immoral about them. And remember, this whole thing was to justify the system that's being created, but also this laissez-faire idea that's going to help monopolies and big. Saying this is the best system. 73 was a big shakeup. It bubbled in stocks and gold. There's also a bubble in gold prices, but also overproduction in railroads. And those are always triggers of financial panics. And then the trigger will be going back in reverse. Time. Oh, tomorrow we'll have another essay question. You excited? That's good. The Coinage Act of 1873, which created the gold standard. Not that the country wasn't on it before, but they also had paper currency. Everything was based on gold. That caused immediate deflation, and that would pop the bubble. That would be the trigger. It was going to happen anyways, but this would be the gold standard which the US would be on fully until 1933 and get off of it totally in 1971, the gold standard. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the Great Depression. But this was an economic catastrophe. It shocked people how bad it was. And it mostly affected where the industry was, the Northeast and the Midwest or the North Central, whatever you want to call it, basically Illinois to New York. Areas that had agriculture were hurt too, but they didn't have as many people reliant upon jobs. And it turned into a worldwide economic depression. There's no formula for what makes a depression. All it means is long-term, sluggish economy and high unemployment. But in just 6 months, look how many businesses, mostly in the Northeast, shut their doors. Unemployment, it's really hard to figure unemployment to this day. Over 20% of the workforce was unemployed, and think about it. Over 40% of people were still full-time farmers, so they're not technically unemployed. And it's hard to figure out what it is, even to this day. It's almost always undercounted, unemployment, because it doesn't count people who have given up looking for work because there's nothing there. Things like that. And wages, profits went down dramatically. People couldn't pay back their debts. It was a catastrophe, and that's why I show the picture of bank failures. It's from a bank panic. And there's not all that many banks, but it was, as it got worse, you can see the worst year wasn't 73, it's 76, 77. The worst year of the Great Depression wasn't when it began, 1929, it was the winter of 32, 33. That was the year that the whole thing just about fell apart. The whole thing as in the US. That was the worst year. The worst year, the one that you had the fun living through, was at the end of 2009. That was the worst year, even though it began a year earlier. And so, and went on for another 6 years or 5 years. And so, this depression. And this is a picture of a bank panic. And what happens with banks is this. So I did not tell you this yesterday, did I? It's called a bank panic or a run on the banks. And so here's a picture of someone turning away people. They're holding up slips of paper. That's their deposit slips. So these are people who put money in the bank. And so what happens at a bank is people put their savings in it, and that's why they give interest. They're trying to encourage you to put savings in. And they give you a piece of paper that's essentially an IOU, that the bank owes you this money. Okay. And they owe you this money. Now, what does the bank do with the money they get from deposits? What do? Yeah, they loan it right back out. They loan it to people who are doing things like speculating. And if all of a sudden those people can't pay it back, how are they going to pay back their deposits? If 1 or 2 people come in and ask for their deposits, just a few, they have enough money on hand. But if everybody does, what happens to the bank? And what happens to your deposits? You went from having a piece of paper saying you're worth this much money because the bank owes you to nothing. And it happens like that. Now, what makes it such a big deal is that's logical for one bank and horrific for the people who have deposits there or have debts tied up through there. So just imagine it's that bank. And now you come to my bank. And let's say you're all depositors in Partridge Bank. You can trust me, right? I'm a healthy bank. Fukar Bank failed. Partridge Bank made it. But you want money in my bank. You see that bank shut its doors, and what's your first thought? I can trust Partridge. No, what's your first thought?
Don't trust him.
Yeah. Would you trust anybody in a panic? So what do all of you do at once? Everybody comes at once to take money out of my healthy bank. And what happens to my healthy bank? It goes under too. And that's why bank panics are so scary. It brings down healthy banks too. And this is a story, this is a picture of, they're basically trying to beat off depositors, tell them, we don't have your money. In fact, back then, there was no insurance on deposits, so it was gone. In your lifetime, there was, in essence, a bank panic, but it didn't turn into something like this because of the New Deal. During the Roosevelt administration, they did what's called the FDIC and put insurance on deposits. So we didn't have that here, and that saved the worldwide economy, without a doubt. So, back here, that's a panic. And that's what's happening all over. The worst year is going into 1876. Remember, that's when Reconstruction ended? It's no coincidence it ended that year. It's no coincidence that all of a sudden the corruption of the Grant administration became such a big deal because people were suffering and terrified. That is why. And so, with wages going down and massive numbers of unemployed people, even profitable companies cut their wages. Remember what I told you, profits do not directly affect wages. The most famous, the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. This started on the B&O Railroad. The B&O Railroad started in Baltimore, the Baltimore and Ohio, but went along the coast. The main line went west and then had a fork, Chicago and St. Louis. At this time, a really profitable railroad. They were still making money in 1877. Making money. Not as near as much as 1872, but they were making money. But what were they doing to their workers' wages? Cutting them. Because they knew workers would have no choice but to take a pay cut. Because they would tell them, you complain about your pay, there are 10 unemployed people out there that are desperate, will take your job for half of what I'm offering you. And that's how they push wages down. So they're squeezing the workers. And so this happened 2 other times in 1877, or the year before 1876, 1877. The third time, the railroad said, we're going to cut your pay by another third. They're making money. Remember, profits do not directly affect wages. They cut their wages, and that's when the workers said, we have enough. We have had enough. And don't think in terms of an organized strike. This was just an upswell of anger. And workers went out, started in Wheeling, West Virginia, which is right here, that little tip of West Virginia on the railroad. And railroad traffic stopped, and it spread into Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh and Altoona. And the governor of Pennsylvania did what governors always did. If workers are striking for better wages, they send out the what? The militia to force them back in, shoot a few, make them accept the lower wages. Remember what I told you, putting down unions is massive government aid for business. Because workers know, what can we do? We can't fight the military. But the members of the militia in Pittsburgh were what kind of people? Workers. And what's happening to them at that time? Isn't it the same thing? They're being unemployed. Their wages are dropping. And they look at the railroad workers, and they're thinking, if I help the B&O Railroad do that to them, I'm basically giving a green light for my employer to do it to me. And so what did they do? What rebellion did the militia join the farmers who were rebelling? Say it again.
Or the bacon. That's one.
Okay, it wasn't bacon, it wasn't whiskey. Shays. I know there's a lot of rebellions, that's why we have to narrow it down to 3, but it's just like Shays Rebellion. They joined, and once that happened, this is actually the workers stopping the railway. They shut down the railroad all throughout the United States. And this triggered a massive nationwide, now nationwide basically meant here, strike along railroads, and then other workers joined them. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of workers came out what we call the Great Upheaval. It was revolution. But no one wanted to call it revolution, especially so close to the Civil War, so they called it the upheaval. And this was just a representation of the anger and the fear of what's going on, where people started saying, wait a second, we're being told we can all get rich in this system, and we are suffering. We're unemployed. We want to work. But if those with the capital aren't hiring, we don't have a job. So this was this upswing. It wasn't like people going, we're going to change and make a perfect ideal society. No, they just wanted a better life. The best examples in St. Louis, a workers group took over City Hall and for a few weeks ran the government of St. Louis. And they copied what happened in Paris a few years earlier called the Commune, where a group of socialists and communists took over. They even adopted a flag of revolution. What color is the flag of revolution? I looked right at it. Why do you think the old Soviet flag was red? The color of patriots' blood. Not defining hatred, that's another story, but, and it embroidered in the flag of St. Louis. They embroidered a loaf of bread with a sword in it. They're what? They're hungry or scared about being hungry. They don't want radical change. They just want a better life. And the flag, unfortunately, the copy they made was burnt down, so we don't, or burnt, the flag burned down. The flag caught fire. It was in a museum, fire. Same thing happened. Remember I told you the flag of California State got burned down with the earthquake and the fire during the earthquake in 1906. Same kind of thing. So it's too bad we don't have that flag. And that's the thing. Rebellions happen when people are hungry or scared about being hungry. That's the biggest cause. In your lifetime, there were revolutions all over, and rebellion called the Arab Spring, 2011, 2012. It's still going on in Syria, a horrible civil war that's evolved into just a nightmare. And it all started because food prices went up 400%. Think about food prices went up 400%. It would change things. You'd be different. By the way, then, if you want to be a dictator, what two things do you need? You need food to make sure everyone is well fed. Especially that greasy, fatty foods that just kind of there. And then what? A screen for them to watch. Because then what will people do? Nothing like today. But, see, aren't I giving you nice, fun tips to be a totalitarian dictator? Who's writing this down? Remember me. So with that, nationwide anger. President Hayes reluctantly sent out federal troops. Now the U.S. Army's tiny, but Reconstruction has ended. And troops fresh from Reconstruction duty, you notice I put down racism. It was not totally a conscious decision, but a lot of those troops on Reconstruction duty were what they called then colored regiments, black soldiers. They started using in Chicago and in Pittsburgh and other places, soldiers from black regiments to put down striking white workers. Remember the big thing about Pittsburgh when the militia joined? But this time they didn't join because of racism. White workers felt resentment against the black soldiers who were of very similar circumstances. Working class people who didn't have much. You would think they should unify, but they didn't. And well into the 1930s, the United States Army would recruit. They started calling them black regiments because it was a very segregated army that were specifically there to put down strikes. In fact, Montana had two black colored regiments, are still called in the 1870s, one in Fort Keogh, Ohio City, and in Missoula, to put down strikes of miners. Use racism to divide people. What rebellion does that sound like? Yeah, that's Bacon. Remember the law, the slave codes and the fornication laws? It's that same thing will go on time after time, divide. And that shows you how racism really is this insidious thing. And resentment with this will go on for years. Which question?
What's polyester?
Oh yeah, I did have one other rebellion. That's where American Indians rebelled in 1863 from the British. And they actually kind of won. That led to the Proclamation of 1763, which helped lead to the Revolutionary War.
Oh, that's right.
And by the way, me saying that, that'd be a good thing on a review packet list you're going to get in a month. It's one of those things that's comes up in the past. Yeah. So with that, big deal. What came out of this? Well, first off, they reformed the militias. 1877, Congress would pass a law creating an organized and, following the language of the Second Amendment, regulated militia. What did they create? Where's the National Guard come from? That is the militia, organized militia, armed and trained by the federal government, but under the control of the governors of each state, specifically designed to put down potential rebellions. In fact, they started making these big armories, big, massive brick buildings that's used as a fort just in case, in big cities. If you ever see the old armories in town, they are a fort on purpose. There's one in Great Falls. They blew it up in 1974. And it's in a movie. They needed a building blowing up, so they timed filming the movie with the armory blowing up. The the old National Guard building here, the one that's by the YMCA, that is designed like an armory, or like a fort. Same thing. So with that, what is it now? What's in there now?
There's a gym.
The white building on the corner.
Yeah.
And lots of lead, because you used to do target practice. Yeah, I know. Jerry soccer. Of course, they had that at CR, remember?
Yeah.
Were you guys in school in CR at any close down? That was right before. It wasn't as bad here. It was at Helena High, too, because they used shotguns. Trap shooting at Helena High. So with that, so the National Guard, and what else did they do? Well, first off, it showed that labor was powerful. It showed many people that we have strong labor unions and organized, we have real economic power. We can shut down the economy, and if we want more political economic power, more rights, more democracy, we have the power. But also, it terrified those who had the capital, the robber barons. Capital's greatest fear was organized workers. Their greatest fear to this day. If workers organize, they have real power, as proven by shutting down the entire economy in 1877. And this has happened other places. We'll see it in 1836, 1837, when a few workers shut down the entire car industry to get better wages and better working conditions. Jay Gould, the robber baron, he helped try to corner the gold market and nearly destroy the economy. But Jay Gould made the famous comment that, well, the comment was, during the upheaval, we have to stop this. We should hire half of the poor people to kill the other half. And how did his peers meet this proposal of mass murder? That sounds like a pretty good idea. We have to consider that. And so, I guess sociopathic behavior was accepted. But that's why this is a big deal. The upheaval. But before we get to that, how did these happen? And that's where we get to, it's written right there, the business cycle. Sometimes it's called the boom-bust cycle, but how do these things happen? And they're endemic in capitalism. You know what I mean by endemic? It's just, it's baked into the cake. It's going to happen, it's hard to avoid. It's baked into laissez-faire. If there's no competition, the effort to get capital, who controls it, and the debt that involved, and our desire to get rich will lead to booms, where the economy is doing well, and the appearance of unending prosperity and absolute tragedy of a bust. Heck, capitalism you can see getting started in the United States by 1815, first bust, 1819. In fact, just 1819, 1828, really bad one, 1837, 1848, really bad one, 1857. The horrific one of 1873. The entire decade of the 1880s was like a bust. 1893, a disaster. 1907, 1920, 1929. Horrific bust. And then during the New Deal, they put controls on speculation, so that didn't happen. As soon as they got rid of the controls in 2000, the next bust would be in 2008. And it will happen again. Hammer time. So with that, boom bust, we're going to draw it. Boom bust cycle, business cycle, and it's in capitalism. These kind of things don't happen without capitalism. And part of what makes it so bad is because of capitalism, there's so many people reliant upon those with the capital for jobs. And if those with the capital aren't hiring, mass misery, good alliteration. Boom! And it's going to go kind of make a loop like this down to bust. So boom. You like the orange pen? Or you want a different color? Orange good? Happy with orange? Bad? Good? Better? Boom bust. What makes a boom bust? What makes boom bust? What makes a boom? What makes a good economy? So these things happen. First off, think about an economy. So you're thinking general prosperity. It's never even. Some people are left out, but generically, good prosperity. What's happening to prices of goods? Are they going up or down? If prices, in fact, I should have started with prices. Backtrack. Oh, quit whining. In my day, we never whined. You ever hear old people whine? Wait a minute, isn't that in my day the definition of a whine? In my day. Okay, that kind of hurt my throat. So, back to this. What's happening to demand for goods in a boom? It's going up. Going up. Wow, things are great. We got to buy stuff. If demand's going up, what's happening to production? Going up. What's happening to wages? Okay. This adds a qualifier to it. If there's more production, what's happening to unemployment?
Down.
It's going down. If unemployment is going down, what's happening to wages? Going up. And the reason why is this. There are fewer people out there looking for jobs. That means when companies are trying to increase production, they have a small pool. How do you encourage a small pool of people to take your job and not someone else's? You got to raise your wages. Or, you know what else happens? Other companies will start trying to poach your workers by offering them more money. So what do you have to do to keep your workers? Pay them more. And so that raises wages. So what happens to prices of goods? If people have more money and they're buying something, just like in wages, they're literally bidding up the price because people are willing to spend more. So what do we call this? Prices going up. Inflation or deflation? Inflation is going up. So prices are going up. What happens to the value of money? It's going down because your money doesn't buy as much. So prices going up, inflation going up. All these things are going up. A few more things are going up. How about banks? What are they doing at that moment? Credit, loaning money. Are they loaning money to a lot of people? Or are like, ooh, they're loaning money like mad. Banks are in competition now to loan money. Why? Because they're thinking, wow, prices are going up. People are making money. I know if I loan money to a lot of people, I'll get it back plus interest down the road. And if I don't do it, other banks will, because everybody's making money. And in fact, they're not taking much for collateral. They're trusting that you have whatever you say is collateral will take it. You'll have a job tomorrow. It just becomes crazy. And what happens to optimism? How do people feel in a boom? The only way to describe it is a euphoria. A euphoria just takes over the country. We're all going to get rich. It is booming. We're making money like mad. Tomorrow's going to be better. I'll have more tomorrow. And the thing about that, especially with prices going up, today you're like, why not buy that new car or that new home or that herd of goats? Why not? All these great things that show prosperity, because tomorrow I'll be able to pay it off. And that also leads to what's happening to debt. Debt is skyrocketing. If I have $100, why not use that for collateral and buy $1 million worth of goats?
So people can't actually pay back.
Well, if the economy is booming, they think they'll have money down the road to pay it back.
Oh.
No, everything's great. And the thing about it is this euphoria hits where I'm going to build my new home. I'll buy real estate. I'll buy land. I'm going to buy a boat. You know, all this stuff. I'm going to expand my business. I'll start a business. In the 2000s, I remember around 2004, 2005, and the economy was doing okay. Not like full boom like it was 10 years ago, but doing pretty good. There's a feeling though, things are going up. And all over Helena, a bunch of little coffee kiosks started all over, everywhere. With the idea, this economy, people are going to be spending $6, $7 for a cup of coffee. And what happened to most of them? There's a few left, but most of them didn't make it. And there's that same idea, just, oh God, I know this will make it because look how things are going. And it all went under. It's a tough business. There's a few left, but not very many. I would say 3/4 went. Because you remember that well, what were you, like 2 or 3? I know all of you were guzzling coffee at that age. But, and the other thing about a boom is when it's going on, people tend to believe that it'll last for how long? Forever. Every single time there's a boom, people think it'll go on forever. It's never going to end. I remember in the 1990s, there were headlines in the paper and in news magazines. Ever heard of things called magazines? They used to sell those, but magazines. It's just weird how that used to be such a big deal and now it's not near as much. But they would say, we have no economy. There'll never be another crash. Everything is different. Well, the first kind of shockwave of the shape of things come would happen in 2000 and 2001. And then one more thing I'm going to add to this boom. One more thing. What's happened in speculation? People buying low, selling high. If prices seem to be going up for everything, speculation skyrocketing. Real estate, stocks, bonds. People are just going nuts buying things. They're speculating like mad. And where do most people get the money to speculate? They borrow it. Because the thing about it is that tomorrow's going to be so good, even if you have $1 million sitting around. What if you use that $1 million for collateral to borrow an additional $9 million? Why not? We're all going to get rich, right? It's actually called buying on margin. And people started doing that. So speculation skyrocketed. What crashes it? Now, speculation's always underneath, but this is what happens every single time. Overproduction. If everybody thinks we're going to be rich by making or producing goods, like for anything from starting coffee houses to producing, buying more land to produce more wheat, they start producing more. It's also sometimes called oversupply. So supply. What happens to prices if all of a sudden now there's more goods than what people want? What do you have to do? Prices begin to drop. And the problem is this. If prices drop, and it's not like this massive, all of a sudden prices drop. It's more, okay, you're not going to raise the prices. You got to cut a little bit. Maybe you have to do some sales, other things. But prices are dropping to sell. The problem is virtually everybody who is selling something, selling some service, they have to borrow money. And they still got to pay it back. If prices drop, doesn't mean your debt goes away. You've got to pay it back. That's the bad thing about debt for an individual or a business. If you have debts and you lose your job, they're not going to say, oh, we're sorry, your debt goes away. No, you got to pay it back. Individuals and businesses have this hanging over. Remember corporations, though? Limited liability. So what does everyone do here? Every single time. I'm not selling, I'm not making as much money per unit to pay back my debt. What do I got to do? Sell more. And they always do this. They overproduce. Every single time they overproduce. Now, isn't that counterintuitive? If there's overproduction, you quit selling. Now, as a whole economy, yeah. But you as an individual, you got to pay back your debts. You got to sell more. But if everybody does it, what happens to price? And this begins to tank the economy. This becomes a cycle. Overproduction, overproduction, overproduction. Prices dropping. If prices drop, what happens to profits? Profits begin to drop. And eventually companies make the big move, cutbacks. Now, cutbacks means slowing down production, or in this context, even going out of business. People quit buying stuff. Maybe they start selling things off. And they start doing this. Well, if you're cutting back on production or cutting back on sales or even go out of business, what happens to unemployment? Unemployment begins to go up. And what happens to demand for goods? If demand drops, what do companies have to do? Because people don't have as much money. More cutbacks. And that's the cycle. Overproduction, 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 cutback, cutback. And that leads to, well, prices dropping, unemployment, profits dropping. We have a name for this. It's called a deflationary curve. A deflationary curve. You notice how it's kind of curved? I'm trying to make a circle, but I ran into the bottom. So we're going to make a kind of a flat bottom circle. It's not perfect. Deflationary curve. Prices dropping, cutbacks, cutbacks, cutbacks. So that means factories are now shutting their doors. They're closing out factories. They're laying off workers. They're trying to get more work out of workers. They're trying to figure a way to cut wages. Then we get the biggie. We haven't mentioned speculation, have we? Now, intuitively, if you held stock and bond and you're watching prices dropping and ooh, maybe the economy, you see it happening. In fact, this term, if this happens for 3 straight months, it's called, or 3 straight quarters, 9 months, it's called a recession. Have you heard that term? 3 straight quarters, recession. If you're sitting back and looking at this and thinking, ooh, there's a recession, would you buy more land or more stock? That's not the way speculation works. They're still in the euphoria. And almost always a bubble creates. The prices begin to go up much higher for various assets than what they're worth. Prices go up for stocks, prices go up for bonds, prices go up for real estate. Why? Let's say you're a speculator. When do you want to buy stock? When the price is what? Low, hoping the price will go up. What's happening to a lot of the stock buyers of these companies as they go out of business and cut back? And they think, ooh, the price is dropping, now it's time to buy. Oh, people are selling off the real estate, now it's time to buy. And that artificially inflates prices. And that's why it's called a bubble. And this happens every time. The horrible panic in your lifetime, the recession began in the winter of 2007. The crash wouldn't be for another year. The Great Depression, it began in 1928. The crash was 29. And so there's this euphoria, but the economy's falling apart. We're all getting rich, no, we're buy, 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 buy. And then it pops. And when the bubble pops, what happens? Just imagine you, foolish enough to invest in Partridge Inc. I'm still in your presence. No, I'm just going to I might go to the back. And so I gave you a portfolio of Partridge Inc. It's $1 million worth of stock, right? You think I have $1 million worth of stock. And then when the bubble bursts, because they found out that actually Partridge Inc. was fake. Yeah, there's no company. And this is worth what now? Just imagine that piece of paper you thought was worth $1 million, and all of a sudden it's not even worth what toilet paper is. No, I'm not kidding. What happened to your wealth you thought you had? What happened to the wealth you're using for collateral to buy your home and pay back your debts? What happened to it? That's called paper value. It's gone. During the crash in 2008, in a month and a half, people lost paper value worth about $16 trillion in a month and a half. Gone. So let's say you owed money to the bank. What happens? Remember the bank panic? Goodbye banks. Bank failures. And that's the panic. Ripples right down the bust. Now, let's look at that thing for a bust. So, I wrote that big thing for Boom, right? So all the things I wrote down for Boom, what happens to production in a boom? Or demand in a boom? I mean, what happens to demand in a bust? Demand is tanked. No one's buying anything. Would you buy anything? Even if you had money, would you buy anything? Heck, if you see half the people around you losing their jobs and homes, what are you thinking? You better hold on. Hoarding of money becomes a big thing. That's why people buy gold. They think, well, I'll hoard my wealth in gold. Even though that's just a commodity too, like. What's next? That's the list I gave you before. So, what happened to wages? What are wages doing in a bust? They're tanking. Wages are tanking. How about prices? Prices are dropping. No one's buying anything, so you have to drop your price to get them to buy it. I know it's kind of weird. You think, got to make money. And how about, okay, inflation? We don't have inflation. What do we have? And so, just imagine you do have money and you want to buy a car. I'm going to buy a car. Yeah, you know, I still have my job. I'm okay, even though there's a bus going around me. I'm going to buy a car during a bust. Would you buy it today or would you wait till tomorrow? If there's deflation, would you buy that car today or wait until tomorrow? What's happening to the prices of goods in deflation? Down. So even if you had the money, deflation encourages you to wait. Does that make sense? Now, as a consumer, that's a smart move, isn't it? What if everybody with money does the same thing? What does that do? It drops demand even more and makes it worse. Next, what happens to credit? What happens to credit in a bust? The banks that survive, you think they're going to trust you? You're going to pay back your debt? No way. They actually have a name for it. It's called a credit freeze. In fact, that went on to 2012 in the United States. Banks were scared to loan money. I mean, they would do it, but it just made it much more difficult. Next. What happens to debt? It's one of those strange things where everybody tries to pay off their debt at once. It makes your overall debt worse. Because no one can pay it back and the economy is worse. Debt gets worse. A spiral of debt. By the way, you notice economic problems all seem to revolve around debt. The boom revolves around debt, and everything revolves around debt. And we know speculation dropped. Let's get to the last one, optimism. What happens to optimism? Doom! We're all done. It's never going to end. People quit taking risks. People hoard their money. In fact, that's when you see, things like maybe they won't care for their homes or houses anymore. I mean, what happens to birth rates? Do people have as many children in a depression? No, birth rates now are still low compared to 2007. What happens to divorces? Divorce rates go up. The biggest cause of divorce is money. Can you imagine what happens in a bust? Divorce rates went up a lot in 2009 and 2010. Yeah. Oh, did I mention production? Production drops. Production drops because why increase production? No one's going to buy your stuff. Thank you for saying that. Because the demand drops. What happens to suicides? Suicides go up dramatically. And you see that every time there's a bust. Every time. And today, I mean, it's the worst. It's worse than it was in the Great Depression today, because we're in the vestiges of the last depression. And life expectancy is now lower than what it was. Well, it's the first time that life expectancy has dropped in over 100 years. And that's mind-boggling. Just mind-boggling. Because it was always, his assumption was, oh yeah, people are living longer. A little bit, but it's not now. Big reason is suicide. I mean, it's really scary, and you can relate it to this. How do you get out of this thing? What do you need? What's that? But you want money. And if people do have money, they're hoarding it. You want because you kind of get right there, something to encourage people to buy stuff. Put money in their hands. If you don't have money, and all of a sudden you get money, what's the first thing you do with that money? Burn it, right? No, what do? You spend it. If you don't have money, you spend it because you probably haven't been able to buy things you need, like clothes or adequate food or just even a gift for your kids or something. But what triggers demand if everybody's afraid of the bad economy? Average people are thinking, I'm going to hold on to my money. Tomorrow might be worse than today. The only thing that's outside of it, this has happened in every single bust, how they get out, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but it's some kind of government action. After 1873, there's a dramatic increase in railroads, and that fueled the steel industry and things like that. Same thing in 1893. During the New Deal, it was massive government building of roads or government buildings, schools, parks, like most of the construction in national parks, all the dams. Almost all of them in the United States were built during the New Deal. This is for the Great Depression. And then the really big hit in demand, the government had to buy lots of stuff for a little thing called war, totally hit it. We got out of it pretty slow. Never really got out of it totally. Also, there's some kind of, a lot of times there's a technological improvement that coincides with this. Better production is still in the 1870s and 1890s. During the New Deal, the big thing were like radios and electronics and things like that. But it was government aid. And once there's more demand, the thing about it is, people start buying more, who get jobs. And companies begin to realize, oh, maybe I should increase production. And if they increase production, what happens to unemployment? Unemployment begins to drop. And with more people with money in their hand, that creates what? Demand. And that is the cycle to get things going again. What happens to prices and profit? And by the way, this will make a fine short answer question that you have to do on your next test. What happens to prices and profit? They begin to go up. Banks begin to loan more money, and the last thing, wages go up. Once wages go up, that's when you see a growth. And who benefits in a bust? The thing about a bust, big, I'm using big generically. Big companies or very wealthy people, if they survived the bust, they make out like bandits. If you're a company, you survive the bust, what happened to all your competitors? They're gone, or can't you just buy them up? Can't you just buy them up? What happens if you have wealth and the value of money goes up? You just came out richer. Who wins? The big. And so every time, oh, last thing, I got to get this down. What economist came up with this? He used it as proof that capitalism was inherently flawed and must be destroyed. His name? Karl Marx.
Is it M-A-R-X?
M-A-R-X. Marx. Lead by presidents. Sorry, I have to get to the last thing. So, on the test, I'm going to ask you to, oh, I didn't tell you this. Go remind me again tomorrow. What curve is this? If this is deflationary, what's this? Inflationary. I'll ask you to kind of maybe do like a brief drawing of a couple things on the inflationary and deflationary curve, couple things to explain. You have to do that on the next test. To scale. Yeah. But you're kind of, anticipate what's going to happen. The Federal Reserve will have a big impact in trying to make a boom. Yeah, but keep it reported.
Also, I thought we were talking about the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And I know some of the things seem counterintuitive.
Yeah, I thought we were talking about the wrong thing.
Oh.
I got confused. Also, just a question. Does deflation, I wrote it down. Does debt go up in both of them?
Yeah.
So that's just arbitrary.
Well, it can start to come down, you know, when the economy is picking up. People are like, oh, better be careful this time. That starts to drop. And then as soon as the bus hits, what happens? But there's all. Everything's built on debt. This class voted for the 2008 financial crash, and you're going to find out. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's so interesting.
Wait, did you ever do one? Or what one for the? I hope he's kidding. That's great. I mean,
It's really interesting.
Or it's. I've spent my last. No, I think I rock with. I know. Still there. National Monument. Yes.
So, I drew up the Boombox cycle for everybody. Now we all know how the economy works.
I like memorizing this.
I think it's really interesting.
I like it.
So we already did 2008 crash. We're gonna go back. Maybe we'll do one day through mania. Okay, we are going to watch something, but we are going to watch a movie tomorrow. Yes, there'll be questions. Most of them up there.
I'm excited.
You know, okay, it's a 50s movie. And so some of the stuff, you know, to our point of view, won't seem as scary. But if you just get past how, you know, the style is changing. And the thing has an element of I haven't decided one of the two. In fact, that's why I like the remake of the thing has an element. When I first saw it, you know, wasn't all even now I see it. It's that scary. All right, so all of you voted yesterday, and the vote was overwhelming. By the way, did you have trouble with only 4?
No, I chose the same choice for every single one.
And it didn't win. You're the reason why we're not going to do 2008 crash now.
2008.
You did vote for others.
I did. I added those as 5, 6.
So, yes, the 2008 financial panic, myths and mysteries in America won. Sports and gambling, cults, Jonestown and Manson, and the Iraq War and Afghanistan. There were a lot of votes. Right underneath it, we have Disney, atomic bomb, 70s culture got a few votes, you know. Political scandals got a few, which is another really good one.
What if our semester test we did just the crash then, so I don't have to suffer.
The crash, you will pay. Yes.
I already suffered once. Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay, include 9/11 in that.
Yeah, I'll put 9/11. What's that? Well,
Can we not just not?
I think I might do 9/11. I might do 9/11 2008 first. I might do that first because I still want to see what the American experience is going to do in a month about the fight of the vote. So I'm going to wait for that one. And then cults. What we'll do afterwards, gambling. I might try to do the gambling either right before or right after the vigilante parade. And that one we will set up the casino. And I'm telling you right now. Well, first off, should we do cults before? Because wouldn't it be easier just to get all the freshmen in our cult?
Yeah.
In fact, that will be your project to start a poll. Wait a minute, I'm filming
Oh,
this.
yeah. When you do sports and gambling, I don't people, I just sit in the corner and the bikini and bought myself.
What's that?
I just sit in the corner and the bikini and bought myself. That way I don't have to lose. Like that.